it was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life. We've become like a third world nation. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security.
Literally chaos. Everything we have to do with, look.
It is absolutely killing us. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
Think you can do it?
Political communication is more about image than factuality. There's a greater emphasis on the politician's background, demeanor and appearance than his or her specific plans. Rather than presenting specific and detailed plans, most politicians use slogans that they repeat over and over again until people associate these slogans with them. On this basis, how does the debate between Trump and Biden evolve? Which tactics do they use? And what are the problems with the debate format? Let's find out. What do you think about the debate? Let us know in the comments. First, a few words about political communication, a subject I've taught for 6 years. There are 4 pillars of political communication. The first pillar is the politician giving positive personal details to show that he's sympathetic and trustworthy, supposedly. The second pillar is the politician presenting his policies, preferably being as general, even vague as possible, so that as many people as possible will agree with him. That's why politicians frequently use slogans like hope, change, and justice that don't mean anything. However, many people only remember the positive emotions they felt when they heard the positive word. Politicians and celebrities, for that matter, bank on that, literally. The third pillar is the politician attacking his opponent rhetorically. This creates a contrast which makes the politician look good, in theory that is. The fourth and final pillar is the politician showing that he's in sync with the values and wishes of ordinary people. This pillar is closely connected to the second pillar.
President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
The framing of the questions should always be noted because the framing can make it easy or difficult for the politician to answer. Here, the question makes it easy for Biden to implement all 4 pillars, from rhetorical attacks on his opponent to positive personal details. Alternatively, the host could have asked, "What will you do to lower prices?" which would have called for a specific and more complicated solution-oriented answer. Biden starts his answer with the pronoun we, guiding the audience to think like he does.
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president, what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, "It's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right." The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible.
Hyperbolic language is common in rhetorical attacks, because strictly speaking, this wasn't all Trump said.
All he said was,
also, Biden leaves out causal relations that could benefit Trump, because even if the percentage Biden mentions is correct, he doesn't mention the factors that contributed to this percentage, including the event he himself mentions.
The pandemic was so badly handled.
He doesn't mention which industries were affected and how. Thus, oversimplifications are also common in rhetorical attacks, and in politics, numbers are frequently used to tell stories of decline, to give the impression that a complex issue is simple, countable, and precisely defined. A rhetorical attack is a way for the politician to get to his positive policies, so that a protagonist-antagonist framework is created, with the politician as the protagonist and his opponent as the antagonist. In the following, Biden continues to mention numbers, this time positive numbers.
And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, but there's more to be done.
Which 15,000 new jobs? Politicians often mention numbers as if numbers are good in and of themselves, and as if mentioning numbers is all people need to know. This is the point of the second pillar, presenting policies as vaguely as possible. Next, it's time for the first and fourth pillars, presenting positive policies and being in sync with the values and wishes of ordinary people, or pretending to.
There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of a household where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems.
Which doesn't explain why the current problems exist, or what he'll do about them specifically. This is merely a sympathy tactic. The generic question Biden was asked makes it easy for politicians, too easy, to perform their rhetorical tactics. In the following, Biden continues with declarations of intent as opposed to specific plans.
And we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over.
Sure, because that's so easy to do. And instead of explaining how to do it, why not make another rhetorical attack?
In addition to that, we're in a situation where if you take a look at all that was done in his administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos, literally chaos.
Which things? Saying the word chaos isn't an argument.
And so we put things back together. We created, I said, those jobs. We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. And the situation is and we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
Thank you, President Trump.
The overarching and oversimplifying claims that they put things back together again. The cost of prescription drugs that Biden mentions is a so-called synecdoche, which allegedly proves this claim. Synecdoches are small parts of an issue or a problem that are used to represent the whole, even though it doesn't necessarily follow that just because costs are down in one area, they're putting things back together again in all areas. Synecdoches have an oversimplifying function, and they're everywhere in politics. It's always possible to mention one area that's going great, but what about all the other areas that might not be going great? Synecdoches are designed to make people forget the latter.
We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID. And when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929.
When politicians are on the defensive, as Trump is here, they often glorify the past, and glorifications involve oversimplifications, because there are different opinions about when the United States had the greatest economy, and whether or not everyone, as Trump generalizes it, was amazed by it. Critics would say that Trump inherited a good economy, while supporters would say that his policies created a good economy. Likewise, there's going to be dispute about whether or not they spent the money necessary. However, at least there's a claim ground structure. The claim is that it was necessary to spend money. Why? So that the country wouldn't end up in a Great Depression. Even though some people would disagree with the argument, claim ground structures make the speaker's reasoning transparent. Claim ground structures represent overt argumentation, whereas simply claims and presuppositions represent covert argumentation. Next, Trump makes a rhetorical attack on his opponent, the third pillar, while presenting positive policies, the second pillar, and being in sync with the voters' values, presumably, the fourth pillar.
By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates. That was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us. A country where the stock market actually was higher.
This excerpt demonstrates my previous points about numbers and synecdoches. Trump doesn't mention a specific number, but implies a higher number. Aside from portraying an issue which is complex and ambiguous as simple and countable, numbers resonate with people because to many people, numbers are synonymous with the speaker's ethos. competence and credibility. It's a synecdoche because it's used to illustrate how great everything was, allegedly. Thus, it's a part that represents the whole. Like Biden, Trump also uses hyperbolic language.
The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants.
The reason why Trump mentions immigrants is twofold. Firstly, because voters notice single issues and judge politicians based on how they respond to these single issues. And immigration is a single issue that people associate with Trump. And secondly, to portray himself as the solution to the wishes and fears that ordinary people have when it comes to this single issue. Furthermore, we notice the same kind of repetition that we saw in Biden's answer.
It's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
There are things that are in chaos, literally chaos.
In rhetoric, this is known as an episusis, a repetition of a word or phrase in quick succession, in order to increase its impact and memorability. In the following, Biden continues with the third pillar, rhetorical attacks. The many areas he mentions in a short time result in oversimplifications. Let's watch.
Thank you, President Biden.
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world, he's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we find ourselves in a situation where his economy, he rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover. The idea that he did something that was significant. And the military, you know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still found ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did. He rewarded the wealthy.
The reason why oversimplifications are important to notice is because they are likely to change the meaning of a given issue. Thus, when Biden creates a discourse about Trump supporting the wealthy, this discourse opens for unwanted objections such as, how does he prove that the tax cut only rewards the wealthy? What about the ordinary people who benefit from working for the wealthy? Might their lives improve as a result of working for companies that generate more money? And if there hadn't been a tax cut, why does Biden want to spend people's tax dollars instead? Furthermore, when talking about soldiers, he doesn't give historical context, the circumstances that Trump inherited. And also, with this kind of reasoning, how can he defend Obama, who can't boast about the same lack of casualties?
I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade.
The ultimate goal of rhetorical attacks is always self-aggrandizement, even at the indirect or unintentional expense of allies. Because of the many leaps, Biden's answer is confusing, and in a better debate format he would have been interrupted, like in this Danish political talk show.
Jeg har givet mit svar på spørgsmålet.
Så du udelukker ikke nye stramninger, hvis
jeg forholder mig ikke til, om der...
Du vil ikke svare på, om der kommer nye stramninger, hvis antallet af asylansøgere stiger igen?
Det afhænger fuldstændig af, hvad det er for en situation, vi kommer til.
Så du udelukker ikke nye stramninger?
Den flygtningepolitik, vi skal føre...
Mette Frederiksen, udelukker du nye stramninger? Men det er så det samme som at sige, du udelukker ikke nye stramninger.
Vi står i den situation, at historisk mange mennesker er på flugt.
Mm-hmm. Det sagde du før, Mette Frederiksen. Du gentager dig selv næsten ord til andet.
Jeg synes faktisk, jeg svarer på dine spørgsmål.
Det synes jeg ikke, du gør.
President Trump, I want to follow up if I can.
Am I allowed to respond to him?
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can do whatever you want with the minute that we give you. I want to follow up. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
Unlike the generic question Biden was asked, this is a solution-oriented question. The premise of the question is that tariffs aren't good or might not be good. Trump's response is an attack on that premise.
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cause countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. But he made a statement. The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down and then they bounced back, and he's taking credit for bounce back jobs. You can't do that.
This answer shows how the 4 pillars of political communication are always in politicians' minds. By presenting the opposite opinion, Trump quickly overrules the question. This way, he doesn't have to explain how he'll make sure the tariffs don't drive prices even higher, because he doesn't acknowledge the premise of the question. Thus, there's a difference between dodging a question and not acknowledging a question. Whether politicians actually don't acknowledge questions they directly or indirectly state they don't acknowledge is another matter though. It's difficult to know what they actually believe personally and what they say to make themselves look good. This kind of debate isn't the best way to get to the truth, and in a better format, Trump would have been asked another how question. In the following, the hyperbolic language takes control as Trump defends himself on all the areas that Biden brought up.
He also said he inherited 9% inflation. No, he inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing. And they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
The way debates like this are set up with a few questions and thus a somewhat loose structure, politicians can jump from one area to the next because linguistic self-defense is what it's about. It's not about discussing issues in detail. It's difficult or impossible for most people to evaluate the inflation percentages that both Biden and Trump mention, and the hosts don't do much or anything to clarify them. Thus, this kind of debate is a perfect opportunity for politicians to engage in the 4 pillars of political communication, with an emphasis on the third, rhetorical attacks. However, for viewers, the ordinary people that both Trump and Biden want on their side, the learning potential is low.
With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now?
Critics would disagree with the line of reasoning here and say that just because a country's in debt, it doesn't mean that top earners can get tax cuts. Critics would say that the question disregards the money that top earners, typically CEOs of big and small companies, can generate for the country and thus ordinary people's lives. Next, this point of view is present in Trump's response. Once again, he overrules the host's line of reasoning by presenting the opposite opinion. Let's watch.
Because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID. And even after COVID, it was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other country. But we spurred, that tax spurred. Now, when we cut the taxes, as an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country.
And then Trump goes on to emphasize his protagonist-antagonist framework by contrasting the past to the present, or what he allegedly considers to be the past and present. This contrast lays the foundation for hyperbolic language and rhetorical attacks. That's a given by now. Let's watch.
The country was going like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else has had. We got hit with COVID. We did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things that we came up with. We gave him something great. Remember, more people died under his administration, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than our administration, and we were right in the middle of it, something which a lot of people don't like to talk about. But he had far more people dying in his administration.
Trump does what all politicians do when they're given long turns of talk: object to his opponent's objections, thus moving further away from the question about tax cuts.
More people died, far more people dying.
Which he repeats 3 times, increasing the impact and memorability of this phrase. In a better format, Trump would have been interrupted after the first 25 seconds and asked a follow-up question. This debate format has the potential to confuse people, not enlighten them.
Not only poor there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent. all of the things he's done, we've become like a third world nation.
This opinion is entirely dependent on the eye of the beholder. For example, critics would argue that this isn't the official opinion of most countries in the European Union. But then again, do the countries in this union actually reflect the opinion of the people they're supposed to represent? Once again, an episusis is at play.
Third world nation, and it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country, and I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
I guess when one of the participants tries to set the agenda in this debate, the host finally reacts. Trump's attempt to act as a host is a clever move rhetorically. He shows assertiveness and at the same time incorporates the fears and wishes of the large demographic he speaks on behalf of, supposedly, showing that he takes people's concerns seriously. On the other hand, critics would say that Trump derails the debate and is being needlessly populistic. Populism is when a person, especially a politician, strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups. However, they both appeal to ordinary people in their campaigns, so a definition like this also depends on the eye of the beholder. In the following, the message in Biden's response is lost because of his self-corrections. This is damaging to his ethos.
We have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Biden's misplaced response makes it easy for Trump to make a counter-objection, using Biden's own word.
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security.
Objections to Biden's response would include, what would that kind of taxing do to the productivity of companies? And ultimately, how would that affect ordinary people's lives? Does more money always equate to better services? Or will there be needless spending of tax dollars, etc.? However, the debate never gets to these questions because it's built around very few questions, very few interruptions. As a result, a debate like this is often more about entertainment than enlightenment.
What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what anyway, I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
That's it for now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.